Apologies if I sound stuffy, just got a new cat that I am somehow significantly more allergic to than the first one. And they both hate each other and have fleas. So my life has been a living... Hello everybody, my name is Mario. This is a channel all about amusement park type stuff, but mostly coasters. I'm gonna rank every coaster and give them a review. Every drop and every hill, every launch and every loop. Rate it 1 to 10 and then we'll do it all again. Gonna rank and review every coaster. Boardwalk Bullet is a compact wooden coaster designed by the Gravity Group and built by Martin and Fleming. It has a height of 96 feet, a top speed of 51 miles per hour, a track length of 3,236 feet, and a ride duration of roughly 58 seconds. While those stats are certainly nothing to write home about, the entire ride takes place on a plot of land that is less than 60,000 square feet. For reference, Gold Striker at California's Great America, a wooden coaster of a similar scale, takes up roughly twice as much space. So Boardwalk Bullet is ridiculously compact, and that contributes to a fantastic ride experience. In addition to just having some really great ride elements, this coaster's sense of speed and excitement is greatly heightened by the track's constant entanglement in its own support structure. The whole time you are flying in and out of the supports, so you have those wooden beams flying over your head, on the sides of you, all around. You feel like you're barely missing them the entire time, and it definitely makes you feel like you are traveling significantly faster than you actually are. And the way you fly through the supports really reminds me of this scene from Harry Potter. Now I'll go into more detail about the on-ride experience in a minute, but first let's look at the off-ride experience. Boardwalk Bullet sits on the waterfront of Kemah Boardwalk, which is located roughly 45 minutes out of Houston. Like I said, my life is a living helping the off-ride experience. The setting of this ride and the park are phenomenal, but on the other hand, the service I received from this park was flat out bad. I was unfortunately only able to go in August of 2020, so that obviously had an impact on my experience. The Kemah Boardwalk is an open entry park, meaning you can walk through the park for free, but you will need either a ride ticket or an all-day ride pass to enjoy any of the attractions. A single ride on Boardwalk Bullet, the park's lone roller coaster, now costs $7, and an all-day ride pass currently costs $26. So if you plan on riding more than 3 times, definitely get that all-day pass. But unless you are dead set on riding this coaster as many times as possible, and you have at least 3 hours to do so, I strongly recommend checking out the crowd levels before purchasing a wristband. I personally chose to forego the all-day pass and purchase a single ticket, and then 2 subsequent tickets for re-rides, as the park was very, very busy on my visit. And purchasing that first ticket was a major inconvenience. After waiting 30 minutes to get to the ticket window, I was told that I couldn't buy a ticket for Boardwalk Bullet because it wasn't currently operating. Now, that makes sense. I'm totally fine with not being able to purchase a ticket for something that isn't open, but it was the only reason I was at the park, so on my way to the car to leave, I see Boardwalk Bullet operating with guests on it. So I went back to the ticket window, waited in line again, and told the same person that the ride was in fact operating and that I would like to purchase a ticket. She then told me that they were probably just testing it. I told her that they were operating it with guests on the ride, but she continued to tell me that she could not sell me a ticket for a ride that isn't open. So I gave up and just slid to the next window, kindly told that person that the ride was in fact operating and that I would like a ticket, and finally, she said, "It's showing that it's closed, but let me radio them to make sure." Seems like something they should have done 45 minutes ago. So eventually I am able to purchase my ticket. But anyway, going up to the ride, the structure is very intimidating and impressive. The queue line is actually built into the ride support structure, so every time a train passes by, the ground and the entire structure shakes. This really gets you hyped for the ride, and a lot of the people in line are understandably intimidated by this. On my visit, however, the line was unfortunately very slow moving, as they were only running one train, and they were only loading every other row. Now, they were doing this for COVID reasons, but it was really annoying because the park clearly didn't care about COVID procedures in any other way. They didn't have a mask policy or any type of social distancing measures in the enclosed queue space, and they also didn't have a single hand sanitizer pump in the entire park. So it was pretty frustrating for the only safety measure to be one that limited the ride's capacity to a quarter of what it is capable of. On top of that, the operators were slow and rude. One of the operators rolled their eyes at me when I politely requested a row and yelled at every guest where they needed to sit, and when the operators were checking restraints, they moved at a snail's pace. Having operated rides with inconsistent COVID restrictions and unruly guests during the pandemic, I can definitely sympathize with some of the difficulties that these operators were dealing with, but at the same time, it still didn't make my experience any more fun. But while the Kemah Boardwalk did provide a less than desirable experience, and it will likely be a long time before I go back, it was still worth it for the on-ride experience. Boardwalk Bullet is completely out of control. It has an amazing combo of lateral forces and airtime, providing one of the wildest experiences on any coaster. Being a wooden coaster definitely helps it achieve that feeling, and overall this ride is just fast-paced and always throwing you around. Your ride on Boardwalk Bullet starts with a right-hand turn followed by a lift hill that drops you off into a 270-degree left-hand turn, followed by the main first drop of the ride. Now, to be completely honest, this was probably the only part of the ride that was a little underwhelming, as this first drop doesn't really provide much airtime in any row other than the back, and even towards the back I expected the airtime to be a lot stronger than it was. I mean, don't get me wrong, it was still good, weak ejector airtime, but I'd seen a few reviews prior to riding this that claimed it had incredibly strong ejector, but I didn't think this drop was all that impressive. But what follows the drop is certainly impressive, as immediately after you have a fantastic head chopper as you dive into the wooden support structure for the first time, and the elements that follow come in such quick succession that I barely knew what was coming at me. The right-hand turn is taken so quickly that you have a decent amount of laterals pushing you to the left side of the train. You have a rapid transition that also serves as somewhat of an ejector airtime hill as you transition into a right-hand turn, so that provides a really good pop of airtime and some fantastic laterals throwing you side to side. And then immediately after that, you step up into another ejector airtime hill that provides a little more sustained pop of airtime while not being quite as strong as that first little pop. What is just as strong though is the laterals throwing you to the side again before you rise up into a turn that doesn't necessarily do all that much, but you are still traveling incredibly fast at this point, so you don't necessarily need to be thrown out of your seat to enjoy this part of the ride. There's a nice airtime hill that follows as you are still banked to the right, so you get a little off-axis airtime there, which is great. It's another moment that's relatively sustained, but not the strongest. You then get an airtime moment that also banks you to the left as you traverse it, that yet again provides a fantastic combination of laterals and airtime, although this element is only really noticeable towards the front of the train, as the back of the train has died down a little bit by the time you hit it. The turn that follows is definitely the only part of the ride where you don't feel like you're hauling, as you honestly barely seem to make it over the apex of this high off the ground turnaround. However, the drop that follows it is fantastic in all rows, albeit for different reasons. In the front row, you get to enjoy the visuals of yet again dipping underneath the support structure, but this time with a steel beam going over your head as the hand chopper. And in the back row, you've regained all of your speed before even traversing the steepest part of that drop, so you'll get a really solid pop of ejector airtime going down the hill. You then traverse yet another fantastic moment of airtime and lateral forces as you experience this really fast-paced speed hill that starts off unbanked and then ends up banking you to the left. The long turn that follows is lower to the ground than both of the other large turns, so you still feel like you are completely flying through the layout. And this turn is also completely enclosed in the wood structure, which, as I've mentioned a million times already, provides fantastic visuals and sense of speed. Another off-axis airtime hill is what follows that, and And while this is probably the weakest so far, at least as far as strength of airtime goes, the angle at which you travel this one is pretty ridiculous for a wooden coaster. I mean, you're at like a 45-degree angle as you're flying over this. So you experience some really strong floater airtime while you are leaning to the left. And it's also pretty darn sustained as well, at least compared to those other really quick pops. That's followed by a hill that is a little more drawn out and not banked at all, that provides a solid and sustained moment of floater airtime throughout the whole train. You then travel into another banked turn that heads upwards and into a nice sustained floater airtime hill that does actually have some variation in the way that it's banked. You enter into the hill banked to the left, the peak of the hill banks you to the right just a tad, and then you bank to the left again by the time you've hit the bottom of the element. The strength of airtime on this moment is definitely stronger towards the back, as you've picked up much more speed by the time you are cresting the apex of the hill. Your direction rapidly changes as you head into a right-hand turn that gives you some really solid laterals pushing you to the left of the train. The elongated right-hand turn continues, but not before you experience this very quick yet strong, again, off-axis airtime hill. And I really can't stress how much these off-axis moments just make it feel like you're completely out of control. Even some really fantastic rides like B&M Hypercoasters, for example, can be fun but feel a little formulaic, whereas this coaster, you really don't know what's coming at you. You're not typically traversing a right-hand turn and then out of nowhere a surprise hill is included in that right-hand turn. It's really wild. Anyway, you finish up that right-hand turn by traveling upward into another airtime hill, and while yes, this is just another moment where you are experiencing really good airtime and laterals, this one is different because you start off banked and the hill ends unbanked, although you are still turning while traversing the hill. So you are going up and floating out of your seat. While you are floating out of your seat, you are being pushed to the side of the train. Really fun and out of control. You then rise up into a turn where you will start to notice that you are losing a little bit of speed, but in the front row you will still get a strong pop of floater airtime. And while this turn definitely does feel slower than a majority of what you've already experienced, you are once again fully encapsulated inside of the wooden structure of the coaster. As your ride experience nears the end, you head up into one last hill that provides solid floater airtime towards the front, not really much towards the back, but all rows will experience some decent laterals as most of the turning hill is unbanked. You traverse one last right-hand turn that is one of the only parts of the ride where you're not experiencing any forces at all, and then you come into the final brakes. And in case you didn't believe me beforehand, hopefully you do now, this ride provides the best combination of laterals and airtime of any coaster I have ever been on. Essentially, none of these airtime moments are traditional airtime moments. They are all throwing you around in a way that most other roller coasters do not. As far as which row I liked the best, the front was definitely my personal favorite. You just get that added sense of speed with the wind blowing in your face, and the fantastic visuals are completely unobstructed. And there's even a couple of airtime moments that are better in the front, although you could make an argument for the back because the first drop and the drop after the slow turnaround are definitely considerably better towards the back. And as far as comfort is concerned, this ride is definitely a bit shaky, but as someone that can be a little sensitive to wooden coasters, I didn't find it to be uncomfortable. It definitely could be smoother and more comfortable, but I think the padding of the seats definitely helps lessen the blows. But with all that being said, what would I rate this coaster? I would give it a 9.5 out of 10, which is honestly kind of inconsistent with where I rank it, as it sits at number 8 out of the 241 coasters that I've been on. And while I personally do think very highly of this coaster, it does have a couple of minute shortcomings. I just don't think it is a perfect coaster, so I can't give it a perfect rating. But my goodness, I've talked more than enough about this ride. I'd love to know what you guys think about it in the comments down below. If you like this video, make sure to give it a thumbs up. Go ahead and subscribe and turn on notifications for more content like this. And make sure to tune in next time where I'll be talking about the coaster that I was supposed to talk about this time. I mean, who says episode 45 has to come before episode 46? Not me.